Ayo, artists and musicians.
Who, us?
Yeah, do you want your own vinyl records?
Yeah, but I can't order 1,000 of them. Or wait like a year to get them. Yeah, we're going on tour in 2 months.
Check out our friends lathecuts.com. They'll make you vinyl singles in quantities as small as 50 copies and as quickly as 3 or 4 weeks.
Get out of here.
You heard me right. All their pricing is a la carte, and they can help you pick a package that fits your budget.
Okay, who we talk to about this?
You need to email my buddy Mike. His address is lathecuts@yahoo.com. And if you mention low profile, you'll get a 10% overrun on your order.
So if I order 50 records,
Mike's gonna send you 55.
if I order 75, I guess you would get 82 and a half?
Something like that. Remember, you gotta mention low profile to get that deal, and it won't be around forever.
What was the address again?
That's lathecuts@yahoo.com. Custom-made records in small quantities. Mention low profile to get a 10% overrun on your order.
And emailing now.
Welcome to Low Profile with Mark Lee Morrison, the show that stands at least 6 feet away from popular music. My guest today, Julian Koster, is a master of the singing saw and a prominent member of cult heroes Neutral Milk Hotel and the founder of his own group, The Music Tapes, both bands part of the storied Elephant Six Collective in Athens, Georgia. He's also the creator of a lavish scripted podcast from WNYC called The Orbiting Human Circus, which is in production on its 3rd season. His music is created using a variety of antiquated recording equipment and unconventional instruments. Julian spoke with me earlier in the fall of 2020 about his involvement in experimental pop, his homespun approach to production, and the perks of having a global audience for the music tapes and the Orbiting Human Circus. Julian, welcome to the podcast Low Profile.
Thank you.
Thank you for giving me some of your time.
Sure, you're welcome. It's been hard work maintaining such a low profile for such a large portion of my life just for this moment, but it was worth it.
Yeah, it was made just for you. Well,
that was the comedy portion. That was the comedy portion of the interview.
Oh, it's over. No more comedy.
That was all I wrote. That was all I wrote. I wrote that early this morning. No, I'm just kidding. I'm gonna stop now.
Well, Julian, you've had a project called The Music Tapes for quite some time now. From what I understand, it sort of evolved out of your sort of childhood tape collaging, or something like that.
Yeah. Yes.
So we talking like pause tapes on the radio and or field recordings? What were you doing as a kid that sort of still is part of your aesthetic?
Well, the music tapes, I think it got its name and it sort of came out of, I think, more like early and mid teenage years than childhood. Because of there was a couple of specific. I had gotten a 4-track cassette recorder, which was I'd been recording on boomboxes, but basically anyway, yeah. So like I spent a lot of time in my room when I was a teenager, like a lot of teenagers, of course, and but I wasn't able to really go out much and especially at a certain point around the time that I had the 4-track, my mom and my stepdad had moved to this place called Florida, and I'd lived in New York previous to that, and you know, I was making cassettes. Like I had a couple of friends, and they were really creative, like really interesting kids that I'd met there. So that was nice at school. But like I'd make cassettes for them, and that was kind of my way of spending time with them. Was I'd make these, like, I'd come home from school and I'd like make this little world for them to listen to, and I'd be really excited to make it for them and to share it with them. And so that was kind of how I started doing like little 4-track albums. And the Silly Putty Symphony was one that I feel like was almost like the first Music Tapes record, because it was a big concept album, and it had um, sonic, like sound effects, like what I would later learn was called musique concrète. I didn't know that about that yet.
Yeah.
But like using sound and sound effects narratively, and then also like having narrative stuff that's almost like, I mean, I think it's almost like taking like sort of like the idea of a concept album, like the Beatles made or something. But then like I was really into performance art, and my mom had did have radio theater records from like the 40s and stuff. So I sort of also started listening to that a little
So
bit and being
you
like,
soak
wow.
that up like a sponge then. Yeah.
Well, I was discovering that at the same time as I was discovering like Sergeant Pepper and a lot of the 60s kind of psychedelic concept albums,
Sure.
and then also electronic music, because my mom had done modern dance choreography when I was really little. And she had this really interesting record collection, and some of it was my dad's as well. My dad and my mom broke up when I was very, very small, but so it was like a really cool record collection, because it was like I was really like, I would go down there and just look at things that I thought had cool album covers, and so it would be like John Cage, or it would be like a radio play from the 30s, or a psychedelic record. And I was being influenced, and performance art. So all those things I think were sort of in my little teenage brain, and I would try to make little records, kind of out of what I was feeling and out of the 4-track cassette world, which was such a cool sounding world. Yeah.
It's interesting because I was actually crashing at my local community college. Not crashing like petitioning the class, but actually just showing up as if I were a student for the duration of the
Uh,
semester to a performance art class. And it was on a lunch break during one of those classes that my friend Forrest put on the first Imaginary Symphony for Nomad.
First Imaginary Symphony for Nomad, performed
My vacuum cleaner.
And it just was something I had never heard before, but immediately identified with. I was just like, this sonically gets me, and I get it back. But
uh,
talking more about your um like your parents' record collection, and how that informed you at such an early age for that sort of a sound. I feel like is not, it's not the teen angst sort of thing that typifies what it's not a, well, maybe it's a different kind of frustration involved emotionally in that music, but it's expressed in such a very mature way. And I feel like having that be something that starts your musical journey is really interesting. And I want to play a clip right here of the Silly Putty Symphony.
Wait, you have something from it?
No, but we can't do that because it it no
Oh,
it exists only as a memory. So
you want to? I was
I
going to be
want to.
amazed. I was like, how did you get that? I mean, I think there's like probably one person. I think it might be in like my friend's parents' like basement or something. There might be like one cassette of it or something in existence. For me, like my room and the world of imagination, being able to go into and recourse to the world of imagination was a bit of a salvation. It was sort of like an escape, because you know, it was like another world I could climb into. And the fact that I was making it for people that I loved that I couldn't be with really made it, captured a lot of created a lot of the spirit of it. And that also kind of like, so the actual content, the creative content was born of that feeling, I think. And there was like one other thing, my grandmother, her sisters were blind, and my maternal grandmother and I were incredibly close. And she would send cassette letters because she'd gotten in the habit of sending them to her blind sisters back
Oh,
and
yeah.
forth. And so she'd send me cassette letters. So also there was like cassette, the sound of cassette, and a sort of intimacy and affection. Yeah, a lot of those cassettes that were so important to me are so much a part of my life. I don't know where they are. But it was funny because some of these things were more imaginary than real. Um, Yet we watched them become real because people believed that they were real, and then they were real. And then the next thing you knew, you were out touring, and it was called that thing that you'd imagined. But so it was fun. It was a really fun moment of learning how things go from being imaginary to becoming real, which of course, as you grow older and you live longer, you realize that's all the world is. Um, and I think it's hilarious that there's ever a time in your life where you don't realize that. But I think you have to be alive for a while, quite a while, to begin to really see it and be like, oh, no, everything, this is just a progression from the imaginary and the unreal to the real, and it never ends. Um, but it was, that makes it a special time when you're beginning to discover that.
That feels like sort of a theme that you have going throughout your work. Um, I just listened to the Orbiting Human Circus for the first time, like in a row. You know, I had listened to it as it was being released, and then I kind of caught up, revisited it, um, and God, do I need a cup of coffee because I've been up for like 40 hours.
Yeah, it's amazing how this medium, this new medium that has sort of taken over a lot of my creative life. It's like you used to make a record, and a record was like 40 minutes if it was a long record. Um, and Now, everything I make is 5 hours long. So, I mean, it's just, it's amazing because the amount of things that I'm just doing all by myself in terms of pure hours, it's really wild. Uh, you know, especially because I used to take years to make a 40-minute record. Um, so, but it's been really cool with the Orbiting Human Circus. It's really nice for me because so many people are involved, even though my my hands are on everything almost to an impossible degree. It's almost unsustainable. There was actually just there was airing dates and airing hours. So like at a certain hour on a certain date, the new episode was coming out, and that was it. So
Yeah.
it was, I was always racing that moment. And there's even some funny stories, like the season finale of Orbiting Human Circus of the Air. I was up for two, like I didn't sleep, like I was up for 2 days and one night without sleeping at all, working on it. And on the last night, uh, I went into my bedroom and I had all the stuff in the other room of the apartment, um, everything. And I just went into my bedroom to get something into the bedroom, and the doorknob fell apart. And the part of the doorknob that goes into the wall was stuck in the wall. But like I didn't have a screwdriver, like I didn't have tools, I didn't have
Gosh.
anything. And like literally, I was like, "What am I gonna do?" I'm like locked in my bedroom, and I have to finish this. This has to
Wait,
go out at
can I
11.
please guess? I
Oh, sure.
Did you pull out your musical saw?
It wasn't in the bedroom. Um, no, what ended up happening was I got rescued. I got rescued by a friend who was helping me engineer some stuff came back, but I was locked in the room for quite a while, and I didn't know I didn't have a phone, and it was just so it was so crazy. But so yeah, so like and also so many times I didn't sleep. Like so a lot of the work that I did was really sleep deprived. And but you just have to finish it. There was an episode in this season where it was this beautiful morning, and in a place where I'd never been, and I'd been working all night, and like the sun had come up, and working on the show, like I was so tired that it was almost like it was all real, like I was living inside of it or something, and but I was still working on it, but it wasn't. I was doing trustworthy work, I felt, and like I finished the episode in that state, and I sent it off, and I was just like, that's it. So, I don't know. So there's a lot of great memories, but it's definitely not a sustainable way to work.
So now you've got a global audience, and you're giving a spotlight to the singing Saw. I feel like you're probably the foremost singing Saw player in the country, if not the world, at this point in time.
I don't know about that. I don't know about that, but I'm definitely I love the Saw.
Where does that come from?
Well, I saw it done when I was a kid, and I thought it was a magic. I mean, I thought it was a magic trick. I thought it was a magic trick. I didn't think it was real. And I think that alone fascinated me, because I feel like music and what happens on stages and what happens when people really share imagination stuff, even if it's just like, I remember my great grandpa telling anecdotes or jokes, long jokes, just anytime that people are really sharing that, I feel like I've always felt like there was a magic there, like a real incredible magic that was maybe one of my favorite things about being alive or life on earth. And so to find an instrument that literally felt like it was a magic trick to me, that just seemed like I couldn't believe it. And I, of course, thought the sound was really beautiful. And I do feel like it's an expressive sound. The saw was always used along with the theremin, and other beautiful, magical instrument, was so often used in early horror films and stuff like that. I think people associated that sound without really listening to it with like, oh, it's spooky.
It's a ghost.
And of course,
it's a
ghost
singing.
But it's a beautiful ghost singing. Yeah. And the thing is that also the way that those instruments were played in this way, that was really goofy or, so in those horror movies. So I don't think people really understood what it could be. And
that's like sort of the amateur way to play it. That's just something that you can do if you fiddle around with it for a few minutes. You can get some wacky sounds from it.
Well, and also it was a job, right? I mean, you could get money to do it in a horror film
Foley
or something,
work.
But it's such a beautiful instrument. And when I was first making music, putting out records with the saw, and sometimes I would play it for like my aunt's friends or something like that. People would be like, "Oh, spooky," and I wouldn't understand it, because to me it was like, it's a choir of angels. You can't hear that, because I was just listening to it at face value, because I just didn't have that association. But they grew up with like those horror movies and stuff. So as soon as they hear a saw,
For
And I
sure.
was always waiting for the day that that would pass. I was always waiting for the day that like just your average person could hear that sound for it's what it was and maybe hear it the way I was hearing it. And I do feel like that time has kind of come, because my saws do kind of, I feel like I've named them and they always have personalities to me, but to be able to actually personify them and make them characters and to make saw music a part of the world and has been incredibly satisfying to me. And certainly every time like I meet it, someone, a kid or something who's like, I learned how to play the saw, you know, it's really exciting to me.
Yeah, and now, so you put out a Singing Saw Christmas album. I snatched one up because I am a corny guy who likes to have a good selection of unique, nice Christmas time albums to put on. That's just a beautiful record that is predominantly singing saw, and it
Yeah, it
really
was
shows
very,
off your sort of virtuosity. Like we could tell just by hearing that clip that you've spent a lot of hours with that piece of hardware, and there's a solid bond. And you're not the first person to take the instrument seriously. I mean, we had like Marlena Dietrich, who
yep.
also was
Hmm.
very adept at the singing saw.
I'd like to say like Marlene Dietrich, I adore her. I absolutely adore her. And I mean, her saw playing is the fact that I didn't know she was a saw player for a long time. And so, of course, that felt very special. But I adore her singing and I adore her acting. Her, Blonde Venus and like the film she made with Joseph von Sternberg are some of my favorite things in the world. And I just love her. So yeah, I have her records. I listen to her records, like her songs, a lot. We do here. Yeah.
Is there anyone else that influenced you on that particular instrument?
Well, Moses Josiah, who was the only person I got one saw lesson in my life from him, and he's a New York fellow, really he was already quite like he seemed quite old to me when I was quite young. Uh, so he was probably like 25 or something. No, I'm just kidding. He was, but like, so he's still, I mean, I saw him a few years ago, but he plays in the subways in New York periodically, sometimes like play in the subways in New York. And, he's an amazing guy. And, he is just a wonderful human and a really, really wonderful saw player. Um, but and then for um, Clara Rockmore's theremin playing was a revelation to me. Like those beautiful, beautiful recordings she made um, with her sister, and it's all classical stuff, but it's the theremin and you know hearing what the theremin could be, um, hearing how beautifully and exquisitely it could be played. But no, I'd have to say that the saws themselves, the cool thing about playing the saw is that every saw has a different voice and a different range and a different. It's like the human voice. It's like every saw has a different personality, But as someone who, I like to say encourages us to sing, it's the way I kind of put it.
I was just
It's
gonna
almost
bring
like,
that up. Yeah.
yeah, you're like, you're taking these personalities, you're finding, you can find it at a garage sale or in somebody's, relative's garage, or, in the basement of some house you're staying at, a saw, and you can look at it and be like, I think you're a singer, and then you can find out what its voice is like, and through that voice, you know, your soul and you can express things that you've never expressed before because you've never had that voice to express it with, and so it's really special that way.
So the first imaginary symphony for Nomad is something that took you a very long time to complete compared to a season of the Orbiting Human Circus.
Yeah. Because a lot of some of the ideas and the material and the intention to make the record kind of started several years before it was done, and I started making it several years before, like the record was actually made chronologically almost. So the first half or the first third of it was probably made in like 1995 or 1996 or something. It was like building an enormous model ship or something. It was so intricate and it was such a big project that I had to put it down sometimes and and do other things because I couldn't do them at the same time. So that's why, yeah, that was many years in the making.
And
Um,
that
and
album definitely felt like a concept album. It seemed like the sort of focal point of the record is that televisions have come from another planet to observe us, and in turn, we have started observing them.
Just to sit in front of us and just watch us television stream of life. We came to Earth just to look inside of you. Look inside of us and you will find we want to be like you. We want to
well, the story of the record is super narrative. It was told in a way that was jumping around in time and very structurally, I think, experimental. So the narrative was more there to be discovered. The televisions were life forms of observers who traveled, observing living life forms, and then they came and turned us into an observing life form. They turned us into a life form of observers. There's that part of it, but the whole thing kind of came from when I was a kid. I liked there was a black and white Superman TV show that was in reruns that you could see sometimes from like the distant past, like from the 50s. George Reeves. But he was the Superman that I knew because that was before those movies, and when I was little, like that was the Superman I was introduced to, was that 1950s television Superman. Because also I didn't really, I didn't come across comic books really as a kid.
Yeah.
Anyway, I remember a conversation about him being dead and that he'd killed himself, he'd shot himself. They were talking about it. and I'd overheard this. And so it was like Superman had shot himself, was kind of what I was getting. And I asked why. And the answer I was given was that he was something called typecast, and I didn't know what that was. So I was like, what's typecast? And they were like, well, it's when you can't escape being the thing that you're perceived as being. And so everyone saw him as Superman, and he couldn't get away from being Superman.
Oh my God.
And that was why he killed himself. And so that was kind of a childhood memory, and something that I took that, and I just, it lived inside my brain, and I started trying to understand it and comprehend it. And then as I got older, I learned more about that story and him, George Reeves. And so this story was almost like a way to free his ghost. Like, the idea of it was, in my mind, was that George Reeves was kind of a ghost, and that because there's a sort of idea that often follows suicides or things like that, or unresolved things, that they're sort of that's how hauntings happen. And I was certainly haunted in a funny way by it, by needing to understand it. And so the album was a way, the story in a funny way was a way to free that ghost, to resolve that thing in imagination. But the album, basically, the story is that it's like there's this kid, and well, in any event, I don't want to tell the whole story of the record now, but basically what ends up happening is that at the end of the record, it begins with sort of like George Reeves or Your Birth, and the album does, and he's born, and from a womb of steel, so he's born out of a vacuum cleaner on the record, but to this mad inventor who was credited for inventing the TVs, but what TVs actually are these creatures from other planets that inhabit. They basically have somebody on the planet, when they're technologically ready, invent their spacesuit that they can come. So televisions are actually just their spacesuits. So when a life form is ready, they give somebody the idea. They plant the idea somehow in somebody's head, and then they make these bodies, these spacesuits that they can then beam into to watch the life form. And so his father was that person on Earth. But at the end of the record, basically, the end of the record is this thing where the speeding bullet is a character on the record, and it sings the song, and the speeding bullet is coming for you. And if you keep listening, then you're basically risking your life, and that, you can die listening to the record.
All those who wish to cease listening, please do so now. And for those of you who will continue on, we offer the best of luck and our sincere hopes that you will conclude this record still in full possession of your life.
And then George Reeves, Superman, who's just flesh, he's just a real person. He's not a Superman. It's like the Superman is kind of like the image, and he's just a person, saves you, and he takes the bullet for you, and then you live, and then he's freed.
Television's Superman was found moments ago dead of a single gunshot wound. More details to follow. At 6 a.m. this morning, daylight savings time, the President of the United States was found crying. White House spokesman declined to comment on this morning's crying episode.
Brian Dewan performed those voices there. He was one of my heroes. He also drew the insert.
Oh, is that right?
And yeah, like I sent him a little comic that I'd drawn, like explaining the story, but I can only really draw clouds, smiling clouds and elephants. So Brian's drawings and Brian's voice and Brian is sort of like a multimedia artist who I've always deeply admired. And so he did those announcements, and yeah, he's really special.
I wanted to ask you about the second Imaginary Symphony. It was a radio drama.
Are all widget factories really cloud factories? Asked Nye. Mr. Ackerman shook his head. No, Nye, no. I suppose most any factory could be a cloud factory. You never know, and that's the point. No one does. That is, except for the cloud makers. And I've even heard tell of people who worked at cloud factories, who, for security reasons, hadn't even the slightest idea. How? Asked Nye. By the same process usually reserved only for unexpected visitors. Atomic hypnosis. Atomic hypnosis? It's just like ordinary hypnosis, only much, much smaller.
It was sort of, a movie on headphones with a terrific narrator.
Brian Dewan.
The very same.
That was a perfect transition. Yeah, no, that was Brian as well. That was Brian. Brian makes these, has made with his cousin these incredible these beautiful, amazing, extraordinary electronic instruments that are these big works of art called Dewanatrons. Brian has made extraordinary records. He was a big influence on and a sometimes collaborator of They Might Be Giants in their formative years. He made the monument on the cover of their album Lincoln. He did the flying gramophone on the artwork for In the Airplane Over the Sea. He's amazing. Brian is
two iconic album covers right there.
Oh, he's Brian is just a pure soul and a pure wonderful artist. So if anyone likes what I do, please, and you don't know what Brian does, you should. His film strips are. If you can find his film strips, they're just. There's not words.
If you even know what a film strip is, dear listener, but you've used a lot of antiquated equipment, like wax cylinders and reel-to-reel tape, and I know that you have a staff lathe cutter for your radio program, but this has been a part of your album recording process too, and it gives it sort of a very timeless sound where it's just like utilizing all the technology at hand that has been thrown by the wayside. Julian, why?
Well, that's why, because it's beautiful. Because to me, it's like human life, everything is transformed, but there's these things that still remain, and in your grandmother's house are these evidences of other times, and then pretty soon your childhood becomes another time, and the stuff of these times is so expressive, and I think what you begin to feel is that they're uniquely expressive. And to me, it was just always natural to think of those things as colors. You look at time as a palette. I think it's natural to hear the mediums of your time and it just be like, oh, this is normal. This is just colorless. This is just what it is now. And this is what things sound like. But it's always this really exaggerated thing that's really expressive of very specific things in reality. And you realize that 15 years later when you're like, wow, why did I have that mullet back then? It just seemed to make so much sense or whatever it is, your metaphoric mullet. And I just never understood why we throw things away. We throw whole worlds away. But for me, it's like time travel, or it's like I can sing into the wire recorder and my voice comes back at me out of the past. Is really what it feels like. It's a very powerful color or a very powerful tool to have. So I think all of these things together and having the incredible privilege of being alive now, where we have so many of these things, some of them exist and are preserved, so we can use these colors of the past to make something new. So I just find it beautiful and fascinating, and I love the machines. I love being with them. They feel very soulful, and they feel like friends. They have a presence. So you're making something with them.
I dreamt 100 castles to wish
tell me a little bit about what's coming up for you?
There's a new Orbiting Human Circus. It's going to be a brand new story. That's going to be another. It might even be like 2 seasons length. I think it's going to be like 14 episodes. That's all basically written, and there's an album that goes with it, sort of like a concept album. It's in a weird way like the hours of audio that are the radio show podcast, and the album together I think are like one piece. It's like a true giant concept album, because that's kind of what it is to me. It's almost like more of a traditional musical.
Oh, cool.
And so it's kind of like part musical, part concept album, but also like very much like an acted out story. But then the album will also be a companion to that. So that is all in the works, but it's going to take a couple of years probably, honestly, by the time that it's all done and put out. And then in the meantime, the jazz quartet, the SAW Jazz Quartet, that's kind of become a part of the sound of the Orbiting Human Circus.
Can you recommend a track that we can hear?
Yeah, it's called Into the River Thames quartet version. There's 2 versions. It's quartet version, and that's the jazz SAW quartet.
How do you feel about that pronunciation of Thames?
Well, it's because the lyrics of the song are it's sung there's a vocal version of the song as well, and the song is sung by a seagull, and so the seagull pronounces the River Thames Thames, and it's a good thing because he ends up rhyming it with flames. So
who is this seagull?
Well, he's the character. He's the main character in the song. That's why it's Into the River Thames. But that ensemble is going to make an album now. We're working on an album now with the Saws, and it's such a great group of people. It's so much fun. Like Gavin, the bass player, is from France. Kolia is from Croatia. And Benji, the pianist, is like a he's from New York, and so it's it's a really fun group of people, and I really love playing this music together. So we're gonna make an album of stuff like that.
Yeah.
Oh, thank you. So I'm really excited about that. Merge is gonna put that out, and it's gonna be an LP and everything too, and so we're working on that now. In the meantime.
So I wanted to ask you a little bit about the major organ and the adding machine. I watched that the other day with my daughters. Both my kids said their favorite scenes were the ones with the little girl, and they really liked the hats that they put on that transport them to other places in the sort of a teleporting. It's like a short sci-fi film that goes along with this very music concrete album. Forever in My Mind is embodied. Congratulations. Thank you. Congratulations. Thank you. Also, that was kind of famously the first emergence of Jeff Mangum of that band Neutral Milk Hotel that you played in once upon a time. Allegedly, he appeared, and he just appeared in a lobster suit.
Well, I mean, there's no need for the allegedly. I mean, if you know Jeff, he's more likely to turn up in a lobster suit than not. And if he's going to have to appear in front of a camera, he'd probably want to be in a lobster suit. And so it's actually a very natural action. Well, the group, the record was it's funny. I was about to say about the record we're making now with the Saw Jazz Quartet for the Orbiting Circus. I was going to say it was just very joyful. And then you start talking about Major Organ. That was very joyful. That was a bunch of friends, a very, very big. I mean, that was like at the time, Elephant Six, we were so many people. At the end of the day, it was like there were so many friends who'd kind of converged on Athens, Georgia, and
Elephant Six is the name of just sort of not so much as a label, the Elephant Six Collective, which, if you read the liner notes on any one of these albums, then you're going to find places to go and sort of bunny trail off into another world of music.
We were an enormous, long, extended family of friends who were all just trying to make, some kind of interesting art, generally audio art or music, but we were all really excited about doing it and supporting each other and doing it with each other. And that record was like just a fun thing that was passed from hand to hand in the most fun way. And it was just a big group of people who, loved art and loved each other, making something together in a really fun way. And, and Jeff and I and Laura Carter and Robbie from the music tapes Cucciaro all lived in a house together. And it started at our house. And then it would kind of go to other houses and come back to our house. And I think that we were, kind of like composing it on the whole until near the end, when it kind of like, I think Eric Harris from Olivia Tremor Control kind of took it and ran with it and oversaw the finishing of it. But anyway, it was this very communal thing, to the point where, like, when the record made royalties, we just didn't know what to do. Because like there were so many of us, we were like, what's the point of splitting up these royalties? It'll be like $2 a person. So it just went into this like bank account, and then eventually, like, I think I wanted to buy an elephant and free it, like from the circus or something.
Mm-hmm.
And, I don't know. My ideas were always very unrealistic, but they had the idea eventually of making the movie, and that was wonderful. So they made the Major Organ movie. And all of Athens was involved in that, and that was really fun. Yeah, and there's one story I can tell you about that movie, which was just there was this. I would do these caroling tours and lullaby tours where I would go from house to house, like usually several houses a night in each city. And I know you saw one of those. I know years and years ago you told me. And but like we had this singing TV in our band, the music tapes. And we couldn't bring the TV on this kind of tour because we were doing like 5 shows a night in 5 different houses in each city and stuff. But the host of the house had made a little fake static, like he'd put a TV on static, literal static, and then he'd drawn the face of our TV on saran wrap and wrapped the TV in saran wrap so the TV had a face. And the little boy came up to me at the end of the show, and he was like too shy to ask his questions. So his mom told me, and she was like, he wants to know if that was the real static out front. And I was just like, oh my God.
Oh, wow.
I was like, this kid knows who Static is and wants to know if that's the real Static. I mean, that blew my mind. But then fast forward a couple of years later, we were actually doing one at their house now. When we walked in the door, like all the kids were gathered around the TV the way kids often are at holiday time. And I overheard this conversation, like, how many times have you seen it? I've seen it 5 times. I've seen it 7 times. And it was the Major Organ movie that they were watching. When I saw the TV, it was the Major Organ movie. I was like, oh my God, this group of children is going to be this is going to be the most interesting group of children when they grow up.
No kidding. No kidding. So you had Static, the singing television. You must have some kind of a mechanics background, or at least know some people, because you're also notorious for having a 7-foot tall metronome at your concerts. And am I just imagining that you guys also had like giant hands clapping?
Yeah, no, it's a machine.
Okay.
It's like a blue box with two wooden arms with giant hands that are made of resin, and there's a lever that controls it, and it makes like a big kind of like sound. The metronome was actually a like an acoustic drum machine. Like you could program different beats.
Wow.
There are just there's these three wheels in the back of it. It's not actually a metronome in the sense that it does have an arm, and the arm is attached to the mechanism. It's attached to these three wheels, but it's actually motor driven. And one thing about the metronome that used to drive me crazy was everybody would refer to it as a prop, which it wasn't a prop. It was making the rhythm that you were hearing, and I just couldn't imagine why you couldn't look closely enough to see that, or that you would want that to be true, and then you would look and you would see that it was true. This beautiful miracle of a machine happened, and I'm saying that because I didn't build it. Like I just made a sketch in a notebook. It's like these people I love made it happen, and so I'm as in awe of it as anyone. And we even turned it around and demonstrated it. We started doing that because I really wanted people to understand what they were seeing. But anyway, I'm glad now that I have to say it's like so gratifying to feel like people's awarenesses, or I don't know how to put it into words, but I feel like people get us now, or I no longer feel so worried that no one's going to get what I'm trying to do. And that's incredibly gratifying. So yeah, I mean, that's one nice thing about now.
Yeah, I think it's a beautiful thing that you're doing.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. All right.
Well, have a good night.
Much love. Bye, Julian. That was Julian Coster of the Music Tapes, who we're hearing right now. This song is called The Darkest Singing Songs, Sleepy Time Down South, from the album Mary's Voice. If you want to learn more about the Music Tapes, you can find some links on this episode's website at lowprofilepodcast.com. Thanks to Julian for doing the interview, thanks to Christy Gressman at WNYC for helping me with some background, and thanks so much to you for listening, subscribing, and recommending Low Profile to your friends. This is Mark Lee Morrison, wishing you well. Catch you again in a couple of weeks.
Fields below, the darkest singing songs, soft and low. You don't have to tell me, because I know. When it's sleepy time down south, soft wind blowing through the pinewood trees. Folks down there live out on trains. When old Mammy gets down on her knees, when it's sleepy time down south, the kudzu keeps growing and growing, with all of Athens in bed, painting the day away. Vernon is smiling, you bet. Hear the banjos